be heard through your computer speakers, so make sure that you turn the volume up on your computer speakers. I'd now like to introduce the moderator for today's webinar, Cision of PR Web. Cision, you have the floor.
Thank you. And welcome everybody to today's webinar, How to Use Your News to Grow Your Business in 3 Easy Steps. Before we get started, I'm going to provide some context for today's webinar, in which we're going to be looking at very traditional challenges as well as some new ones. And the PR Web story is really one of traditional versus new. Like a traditional newswire service, we get news releases to journalists and media outlets. At the same time, our primary channel of communication is the Internet, and so we use channels like RSS and search that allow us to reach a much broader audience of people. A good example is a feature we just rolled out in January, Tweet It, which will auto-post to your Twitter account once your PR Web press release goes live. Twitter, as a matter of fact, is how I met today's speaker, but I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So for years, we've been working with customers around the world to help get their news out. Many of our customers are folks with years of experience crafting press releases and pitching news outlets. And for them, the challenge is a new one. It's how do you use these new distribution channels like Twitter to get your content out and to connect with new audiences online. Others are familiar with these new channels, but want more education in the fundamentals. And so today we're going to be providing a holistic approach that addresses both of these needs, and we have a speaker who's perfectly suited for this. First, a bit about the format of today. We're going to be presenting for the first 30 minutes, after which time we're going to be looking at 3 case studies. So in the confirmation email we sent around, we provided you with the opportunity to submit a business challenge. And we're going to have today's speaker go through 3 of these hand-picked business challenges and provide her thoughts on possible news angles and ways she would publicize these businesses. Finally, we've reserved 15 minutes at the end of today's webinar for a Q&A session where I will be presenting questions coming from you, the audience, in the Q&A pod down below to Dana. We're going to try to get to as many of your questions as possible. I should also note that if you are an active Twitter user, we are going to be organizing our Twitter conversation using the #PRWeb tag, which you see on the bottom right. After the webinar, you'll be directed to a brief questionnaire. So if you have a few minutes, we'd love to hear your feedback on today's webinar. We take that feedback and we try to improve our future webinars. And after the webinar, we'll also be sending around a PDF with all of today's slides. So you guys will get a copy of today's slide deck. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dana Wilhoit from the press release site. So Dana, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Cision. Let's see, I'm just clicking on the slides. Okay, yes, I made it work. All right. Okay, hello, and thank you so much for being here today. We're here to talk about how to get the most out of your press releases by finding a good news angle, by using keyword research to ensure that your press release ranks for the keywords that you choose, and by using the power of social media marketing to vastly increase your reach. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about me and my background and experience. I was a newspaper reporter at daily and weekly newspapers for 17 years, worked in various parts of the country, California, Houston, Texas, Boston, and Lowell, Massachusetts, and most recently at the Lakeland Ledger in Lakeland, Florida. And during that time, needless to say, I read through a lot of press releases because frequently I was the one who had to choose what press releases we were going to write into stories. And some of the press releases were good. Some of them were bad. Some of them were just laughably awful. And I got a pretty good idea of what makes a press release readable and, more importantly, what makes it interesting and, potentially newsworthy and something that a newspaper editor or reporter would consider putting it in the paper. So about a year and a half ago, I left the newspaper business to start my own business, the press release site. And I write and distribute press releases online. I create info products, and lately I've been doing some social media consulting for some of my press release clients because I get a lot of traffic to my website just by using Twitter, and a lot of my clients were interested in finding out how they could do the same thing because it's basically free traffic and free, very targeted, very productive traffic. So, when I first started in the newspaper business in 1991, a publicity campaign, especially one done on a budget, meant that people mass mailed or faxed press releases to every newspaper that they could find, and they hoped that somebody would pick up the press release. And frankly, that's not the most effective approach. It wasn't the most effective approach back then when newspapers were healthy and when there were a lot of newspapers and a lot of room to print lots of news. And newspapers now, unfortunately, are shrinking. These days, online press release distribution services are just, they cannot be ignored. They're a really vital part of your publicity campaign. And it pains me to say it because I love newspapers and I'm a diehard newspaper reader, but it's true. Less and less people are reading newspapers every year. Your audience is basically moving away from newspapers. I'm not saying to ignore newspapers and other mainstream media when you're promoting your product or your services, but I am saying that ignoring the power of online press release distribution would be a huge mistake. In fact, statistics show that the people that you are trying to reach are far more likely to be online these days than they are to be reading a newspaper. Those are statistics for March of 2009 from Nielsen Online, and that is more than 6.1 billion searches done on Google in March 2009. 1.5 billion searches on Yahoo, and 92.6 million searches on MSN, and 356 million searches on AOL, and so on and so on. Ask.com, taking up the rear there. But anyway, my point there is that these people, newspapers sadly get nowhere near this kind of readership, and the people who are searching for any kind of information have pretty much all moved or mostly moved online. So now we're going to talk a little bit about keyword research because you really need to keep your online audience in mind these days when you are crafting your press releases. And what I've done here is I put the keywords in bold for this press release that I wrote for one of my clients. And basically, in your press release, you want to incorporate the keyword or keyword phrases that your potential customers are most likely looking for. And ideally, you want to put the keyword in the headline. You want to put it in the first sentence, towards the end of the first sentence if you can, and then maybe once or twice more throughout the body of the press release. And you don't want to put in the keyword too many times because it starts making the writing look clunky and just not well written, and you are writing for humans as well as for the search engines. So when I'm doing keyword research for my clients, I always ask them if they know what keywords they want to use, and if not, I can do the research for them. And I like to use the Google Keywords External tool because it's free and because it's from Google, obviously the big, monster of all the search engines where everybody is, and I figure, get it straight from the horse's mouth. They estimate how many monthly searches there are for your particular keyword or keyword phrase, and it doesn't get much more authoritative than Google. There are paid keyword tools out there, but since they're just kind of guesstimating and Google actually knows, I like to use them. So let's say, for instance, that you have a website. Sorry, I forgot. I like to see at least 5,000 or more searches a month for a keyword phrase. I don't have a hard and fast rule, but if there's significantly less than that, if there's only a few hundred, certainly I would pick a different keyword. So let's say you have a website dedicated to helping people find foreclosures, and you want to send out a press release about it. And you see where the arrow is pointing, the little red outlined arrow. And you would type in your phrase there. So you might type in finding foreclosures, and then you would click on get keyword ideas. And here you see why keyword research is so vital, because you look at the different phrases and you look at the approximate search volume per month, and you see that changing one or two words, adding one or two letters makes a difference of the top one, find foreclosures. There's an average approximate search volume of 9,900 searches a month. And then when you drop down to finding foreclosures, there is an approximate average search volume of 1,600 searches a month. So using this tool can give you the ideas for what the best keyword phrase is to incorporate in your press releases, and that will just get you a lot more views, a lot more traffic, get you in front of a lot more eyeballs, which is what you are basically looking for there. Okay, so now that we have talked about keyword research, I'd like to move on to talking about making your press release interesting by finding a news angle. And there is a lot more to writing a press release than just typing up your news and saying that something happened at your company. You need to, you want to make it interesting, you want to make it compelling and timely, and to increase your chance of getting picked up by major media outlets, by bloggers, etc. It's very important that you come up with a news angle to your story. So when you're writing it, you've got to not look at, it's your company, everything you do is fascinating. You've got to ask yourself, what is new and interesting about my announcement? Why should anyone who is reading it care? As in, how does it affect them? What are they going to learn or get out of this? So one of the easiest ways to make a press release interesting and timely and newsworthy is to tie it into current news trends. For instance, one of my clients needed a press release because he had recently released an info product which teaches people how to flip websites. I'm talking too fast. Now, this means buying a website, sprucing it up a little, getting more traffic to it, and then reselling it for more money. Now, this by itself is really not that interesting. But websites are basically virtual real estate. So I wrote the press release with the angle that there's a hot new market for flipping real estate, virtual real estate. So I was tying it in with current news and the current state of the real estate market. And basically, to get ideas for news angles, you should start regularly scanning Google News, Yahoo News, reading through the daily newspapers, just basically going through all the news sources and getting an idea of, what the hot topics are. These days, obviously, real estate, the economy, those kind of things, it's pretty clear, but, you can get some ideas by looking through these sources. Okay. Now, we had glanced at that earlier for keyword research purposes. And, but I'm bringing this up again because I wanted to say don't forget the entertainment world when you are writing your press releases. My friend Jackie, and I would love to steal credit for this, but she's got this book called Aging Backwards, and when she happened to release her book around the same time that Benjamin Pitt's movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, hit the movie theaters, and she wanted to rush the press release out to make sure that it would be able to piggyback on some of the buzz created by the movie. So it was brilliant marketing on her part, and it got her a ton of buzz and very good search engine placement. And so I would say that if you want to, your press releases sexy, basically, jazz them up. Remember to regularly keep an eye out on what movies have just been released, what blockbuster books are out right now, what movie stars or musicians or other celebrities are doing at the moment that's, interesting or controversial. And always consider how you could use that as a way to generate your own buzz by tying your news announcement into it. And when I'm looking to see what's going on in entertainment news, again, Google, news.google.com. They have an entertainment section on their homepage, and that's always a good place to scan for the latest entertainment news. These are some other websites that I go through regularly, not just because I love gossip, but because they're a good source of entertainment news. And again, entertainment news can be more interesting, less dry. People immediately pay attention to what celebrities are doing. So any one of those links, and I'm pretty sure that all of this will be available will be downloadable after the webinar. So you can have all these links. Okay, and all right. So let's say, however, that you don't have any good ideas for a news angle right now, and there's just nothing in the national news, nothing in the entertainment news that is striking you as particularly relevant to your company. There's just you're drawing a blank there. You can always create your own news angle. And some of the ways that you can do this: hold a contest, sponsor an event, do a poll, have a raffle for charity, offer a free seminar, have a look-alike contest around holidays, like a Washington's birthday, 4th of July, Uncle Sam look-alike contest, tie into holidays or National Awareness Months, and I'll elaborate on that. Basically, any one of these ideas on this page are not only a good news angle for your press release, but they're also a good reason to contact the local media to try to get some media coverage. And I'd just like to throw a little handy tip in there as a former reporter. Contact the newspaper or magazine or, especially magazines, but TV, radio. Never contact them the day of. Contact them weeks beforehand and find out what their deadline is. Because, it just used to make my head spin around when people would call me up and say, hey, I've got an event this afternoon. Can you be there? And I guarantee you I could never be there this afternoon because I had breaking news to deal with. I had things that people had scheduled weeks in advance. So if you want to have any chance of getting local media to pick you up, find out what their deadlines are well in advance. But anyway, just as talking a little bit more about creating your own news angle. Let's say, as an example, you're a dermatologist. You could offer to give a seminar for free skin cancer screenings for senior citizens and announce that to all the local media. So you've just created your own news angle and your own media event. Let's say you have a bookstore. You could have a costume contest and ask people to come dressed as their favorite fictional character to win a gift certificate or a basket of books or some other prize. And again, you've created your own news angle. You've created something, a good photo opportunity. So think of photo opportunities when you're thinking of creating your own news angle. And basically, whenever you do anything for charity, you have a much better chance of getting picked up by actual media because it's just, they're seeing it as a public service. Newspapers are there to serve the public. And so if you're doing something that helps people rather than just something that is strictly promotional, they're much more likely to pick you up. Holidays are always a good excuse to come up with some kind of story, a chance to do the good for those in the community and, frankly, get some mileage out of it. You hold a contest, you have giveaways, like, say, coloring contest for kids, gingerbread building contest. set up a place in your store where you're collecting items for homeless shelters or battered women's shelters or something like that. Great things to do around the holidays, and good chance that you can get a reporter to show up at some point and take a picture. I had mentioned National Awareness Month, and oops, I went too far. Hold on, sorry. You know what, my computer's being slow. Okay, National Awareness Month. I don't know if that's me or, okay. Just as an example, Diabetes Awareness Month, Pet Adoption Awareness Month, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Those are another good reason to write a press release, and another good reason to contact the local media if you're, and you could do one of those, you know, every month, like your charity of the month kind of thing. And then the other thing is, say you're doing a Breast Cancer Awareness Month, you could contact the National Cancer Foundation. They might, you know, give you some press. They might, you know, help you promote it because you're helping them. So basically, now that you have done your keyword research and found or created a good news angle and written up your press release, you need to do a couple of things. First, you want to take your press release and you want to put it on your website in the section that you have created for press. And if you do not have a section, then create one. Create a page where you put all of your press releases, title it Media Room or Press. It just gives you a lot more credibility. It makes you just look like a big official company organization, and you put your contact information at the top of the page. And every single time you write a press release, even if it doesn't get picked up anywhere, you put that press release on your site. And secondly, you need to distribute it via an online distribution service, which is why we're on this slide showing PR Web's. And of course, this is entirely self-serving because I've got the webinar at the very top here, but also you want this online. You know, you don't want to waste all that keyword research. And another suggestion, I always tell my clients when they're having a hard time thinking of news angles or how to write a headline or the proper structure of a press release, I tell them to go to PR Web and just read half a dozen press releases, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what a press release should look like, because PR Web has actual human editors as opposed to some sites that just toss up any press release. And that way, if a press release is approved by PR Web, you know it's in the proper format. So it's a good way to learn how to write your own. And finally, I would like to talk about promoting via Twitter and social media marketing. Now, if you look at my homepage here, you will see that I have 14,436 followers. And believe me, I worked very hard to get that number of followers, and there's a reason for that. You also see that I'm following about the same number. And when you go on Twitter and follow people, there's a good chance that they will follow you back. And the more people that you have following you, the more people are going to see your message every time that you tweet it. And I use this to drive several hundred visitors in a day to my blog, and people are amazed when I tell them this, but I get almost all of my clients, my press release writing clients, from Twitter. So I literally make my living off of Twitter. And basically I do this by writing good, useful posts about press releases, and I tweet a link to it, and I am always giving away free information on Twitter. And this has, you know, various, I'll tell you, the reason that Cision saw me is because I tweeted something on Twitter about PR Web drives the most traffic for my clients, and that was before I'd ever met him or, you know, spoken to him, but it's true, and I like to tell people what press release services work the best. And so he and I started speaking back and forth and, you know, talked about my background and everything, and he invited me to be on the PR Web Advisory Council. So Another advantage of being on Twitter is that it gets you the attention of the leaders in your field, which never hurts. But I mean, I get thousands of dollars of orders every month just by using Twitter, and you have to be on there regularly. I mean, several times a day, talking, just giving out good information that shows that you know what you're talking about, that shows that you are the expert in your field. And of course, you have to actually be that expert, because if you're on there talking and you have no idea what you're talking about, then you're just going to publicly fall flat on your face. But it's a wonderful place to show your expertise. And that brings me to Twello, which is the Twitter Yellow Pages. When you follow people, you want to follow people in your industry. So if I were in aerospace and aviation, which I'm not, then I would go on there. I would follow, if NASA had a Twitter page, I would be following them. If I were a lawyer, somewhere on there there's lawyers, I know. Law. I would be following lawyers, because people who are interested in law are going to be following lawyers. So basically, you are looking to follow a bunch of people in your area, in your field, and they will follow you back, and then you'll just build up a big audience of people who are interested in what you have to say. And I mean, it sounds just ridiculously easy that you can just go on there and talk about your business and what you're doing, and that you can get orders and get customers that way, but it is truly that easy. And the other thing, PR Web has an option to announce your new press releases on Twitter, so you always want to use that, because you're trying to get the maximum reach for your press releases. And Twitter is just a fantastic way to get the word out. And that is pretty much the conclusion. So Cision, I'm going to now turn it back over to you.
Well, great. Thanks, Dana. We had a lot of great questions coming in. I have about 10 noted here, so we have plenty of things to discuss during the Q&A. But first, let's spend some time and talk a little bit through some of the different examples we had our webinar participants sent in. Maybe you could just kind of review. Maybe we could talk about 3 of them.
Okay. Let's see. We had some people sending in some good questions. All right. John Doble of Classroom Ready Limited. I'm allowed to actually use their names, right? I hope, since I just...
I hope so.
Okay.
They volunteered to have their sites and their businesses discussed on the webinar. So.
Okay. Of classroomready.com, which they have educational material for, it looks like, middle school and possibly junior high ages. And they say their greatest challenge is getting their product out in front of their very specialized target market in the most cost-effective manner. Well, this will sound a little redundant, but since I just was talking about Twitter, but Twitter is free, and it is very easy to identify people who are in your target market. For instance, for them, there's a group called Twitter Moms. I would look up them. I would go on Twello and I'd look up educators, and again, I'd look up teachers on there. I'd do some Google research, and I'd find leaders in the field. And the wonderful thing about Twitter is it's basically like getting to look at somebody's email list. So you can go through and see all these people who are following, say, a teacher, or somebody else who produces educational materials, and follow all of their followers. And most of them will follow you back. And then I would go on Twitter, 3 or 4 times a day. I'd talk about my business. I'd talk about satisfied customers. I'd invite people to ask questions. I might, do contests or something like that. But that's, it doesn't get much cheaper than that because it's free. So in addition to press releases, you know, for the branding, for the online visibility and all that, social media marketing is fantastic. I'd also recommend a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page, and there is an application called Hello Text, and there's also one called Ping FM. And what they do is they're free, and you just go to their websites, and you can simultaneously update all your social networking sites at the same time. So I do that quite a bit. When I go on to make some kind of announcement, I am updating, you know, I'm only on 3 or 4 social networking sites because I only have so much time. But, I mean, you could update a couple of dozen social networking sites if you wanted to, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. So, again, it's free, it gets the word out, and you can pick and choose who your target market is.
Dana, let me ask you some questions about Twitter at this point in time. We're getting so many questions. I want to make sure we have ample time, and this seems like a good opportunity because of the case study you just discussed. Would you suggest the proprietor for this business create the Twitter account using their name or the name of their company?
You know, you could go either way. Since this is really to promote the business and not the person, I would say, in this case, I would suggest that they do classroomready.com because it instantly gives you a general idea of what this company does, whereas the name John Doble doesn't tell you anything. And if he's trying to get more search engine optimization, just as an example, my Twitter homepage is to PageRank 4. So you can get good PageRank for your Twitter homepage, and to just get the name out there, I would pick his business name. Interesting.
And how much time would you suggest to spend on Twitter? I mean, how much time did it take you to build up your following? I mean, just on a weekly basis.
Well, I'm on there every day, but probably a grand total of half an hour to 45 minutes a day. And what I suggest that people do is, you know, first thing in the morning, go on Twitter, interact, you know, go comment on things that other people have said, go check to see what replies people have given to what you have said, post a few things, and, you know, again, it's only 140 characters. It's a real short, like, sentence or two, so it doesn't take you that long to write it. And then you just you move on. You go do your work day for a few hours, and then you go back on in the afternoon. And then, you know, again in the evening at the end of your work day. And part of the reason for that is that if somebody is not on Twitter right when you're on there tweeting, basically they won't see it. So to reach more people, you want to be on at different times of the day, just, you know, to accommodate an international audience, to accommodate people who check in at different times.
And what are some of the different tips and tactics you have for getting followers? I mean, following people is I guess one way, huh? What are some other ways?
That's you know, the main thing. Okay, I always recommend that people don't use like the default template. You want to show people that you're professional. So to increase the likelihood that people will follow you back, you want to get a custom designed Twitter background, and it really doesn't cost that much. I think I paid my designer like $77. And then you want to upload an avatar, because you don't look very professional if you have the default Twitter template and the default little brown box that they give instead of a picture. So you want your picture and your Twitter background on there. And otherwise, really in the beginning, it really is just going on there and following a bunch of people and making sure that you engage in conversation. There are things that I would advise against that are a big turnoff. Somebody was just saying, what is the name of the site that allows you to update all of your social media sites at the same time? The one that I use is Ping FM, www.ping.fm. And then there's another one called Hello Text, and it's hello.text. TXT, but you could Google those. Bad practices on Twitter are sending out links to sales products, because you're really on there to network. It's just like a giant online chamber of commerce where you're in there to make conversation. So the hard sell does not work at all. And if you do nothing but link to your website, if you never engage in conversation with people there, people find that to be a turnoff, because again, you can't go in and hog the entire conversation. You have to share and interact.
Right. So it's almost like someone, coming up to you who you've never met, and they're just talking about themselves constantly, and they don't ask you any questions about yourself, and they don't listen to what you're saying. I mean, just think about it, I guess, in day-to-day interactions. Who would want to interact with someone like that?
Exactly. Or like if you were at a Chamber of Commerce meeting and somebody, is the real estate agent, and they walk up and shove their card in your hand before you even say hello, that's a big turnoff. But if they're a real estate agent and you're in the market for buying a house and they ask you about you and what you do and your business and how are things going, you are much more likely to want to do business with them.
Right. So maybe we can move on to our second case study now, Dana.
Okay. I just drank it. Case study. Okay. Lawrence Stanley of the CapEx Group, and it's www.capxgroup.com. Getting prospects to accept change with a sense of urgency. If I think I understand what he's asking there. Basically, communicating a sense of urgency in your press release, like an advertising, like in a sales page, you need to make the customers see what's in it for them, basically. And I'll read just the first. The CapEx Group is a comprehensive management company that markets full-service warranty and extended service contract programs covering capital equipment, et cetera, et cetera. On their website, they talk about how they're more affordable and how they provide a more affordable solution. And I would, in a case like this, I would try to tie into the current economy. Businesses have to watch every penny now, and this is a more affordable solution, et cetera. So that sense of urgency comes when the customer sees that they will lose money by not picking this company, if that makes sense.
Okay. While you were talking, I was thinking a little bit about some of the questions we had about the more traditional approaches. And earlier, when you were talking about getting press releases out, we had a lot of questions about press kits. And I wonder, you have great experience coming from the other side of the fence. Can you talk a little bit about how you would receive press kits and whether they would actually work for you and what you would like to see in them and whether they're appropriate today?
Yeah, I always tell my clients, you need to be ready for the media to contact you. And, important things to have in a press kit are a good photo either of yourself or your product or your book or your movie, or both, preferably both, like a professional snapshot. Just a bio that has the relevant information, for your particular industry, your background, your experience, your contact information, just anything that makes a reporter's life easier. Just, a one-page bio and, a couple of good photographs are really enough. And it's not a bad idea to have them both in print form so that you can mail them, and online so that you can email them and get them to whatever media are interested. And as far as when I would go to interview anybody, I would always ask, like if I were going to do a feature story on a person or a product or company, I'd always ask for their press kit, and pretty much they'd almost always have one, and it just made my life a lot easier. It wouldn't be the difference between me not doing a story and doing one, but it just it makes you look more professional. It just it also sums up the information. If the journalist goes looking for the information, who knows what they'll find. If you present the information, it's just like writing a press release. You are controlling what information gets out there. So, yeah, I think having a press kit is very important.
Now, these days, I mean, do you need a separate press kit, or can you just provide them with hyperlinks and file attachments and things like that on the press release? I mean, I guess when you're faxing or emailing a press release, you do need a separate press kit. But these days, does it make more sense to just have that stuff online and readily available so they can just click and get it?
Well, if you have a website, which everybody should, then yes, it is definitely a good idea to have that, like, in your press room, which I'd mentioned having. It certainly couldn't hurt to have your bio, your picture, and all that kind of stuff, and certainly like hyperlinked. If you're sending out your press release and you can put in hyperlinks and all that kind of stuff, that's one place to put it. But the thing is, let's say you might want to create a separate press kit for like a specific event. Like, let's say you're an author and you have a new book coming out. You might want to create a specific press kit for that. Now, that can be in a page on your website, but you just want something that's there packaged up that just makes it easier and faster for the journalist to glance at it and be like, oh, that looks interesting.
Yeah, I guess ease is the most important thing. I mean, whatever you can do to make the journalist's life easier, it seems like that's the route you should go.
Yeah, especially these days with all the layoffs, everybody's just crazy busy in the newsrooms. There's less people to do more work.
Yeah, let me ask you, I mean, again, if you could just wear your media hat for a second. Let's say I'm a PR person, and I've created my news angle, and I've sent out my press release, and you've received it. What is the appropriate length of time I should wait before following up with you? Or should I even follow up with you, or should I wait for you to get back to me? Oh,
you should follow up, trust me. I mean, it's not in the news reporter, you have to do it in a polite way, of course, but the news reporter has so much competing for their attention. I mean, there's breaking news on your beat, there's feature stuff that's scheduled, there's your projects that you're working on, that generally when somebody sends out a press release, it's not going to be the reporter's top priority. So what I always tell my clients is you want to first make sure that you're sending the press release out to the appropriate outlet. I mean, I would get press releases all the time that had nothing to do with my local readership, and there was no reason for me to run them. So it's just a waste of, fax paper. So, for instance, if somebody, just published a book, but they live in another state and have no local ties, we're just not that interested. But if a local author publishes a book, then we're very interested, if you get what I'm saying. So, if I've just, published a book, I would be contacting all my local media and trying to set up interviews. And then what you do is you want to find out what editor or reporter you would submit this news to. You want to find out, how much advance notice they need before running something, if there's an event coming up especially. And then after sending it, I'd wait maybe 2-3 days, assuming it's not timely, and then I'd just give a polite call and say, hey, just checking to see if you got this. Is there any other information I can give you? Any ideas as to whether you'd be interested in running this? And then you'll know from what the reporter says. I mean, if they're abrupt and whatever, not that interested, then you move on. If they, say, yeah, call me back towards the end of the week, they'll tell you what to do, basically.
Okay.
But I would not leave it in the reporter's hands to call you back, because it's less likely that you'll hear back from them.
Right. So I guess the message here, though, I think just stepping back, is the social media tools like Twitter, for instance, and even the online services like PR Web, I mean, those are a pretty important component of how you're driving traffic and how you're driving business. But you also need to kind of continue to do those traditional PR, to engage in those traditional PR tactics. Like, you still need to have a list. You still need to send it out to that list via email or whatever means. And you still need to follow up with those people if that's your goal, if getting that media coverage is your goal. So, I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some people just want or, can't really afford or don't have the time to do the, full-on mainstream media campaign, and that does take time. I mean, publicists who can get you into national media charge, anywhere from a few $1,000s to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 because it's very valuable. But I really think that you can do a very successful online-only media campaign. And I think that even if you're pursuing newspapers and television, you should not ignore online, because these days people tell me all the time, oh, I went and looked you up on Google. And I want to make sure that the information that they find out about me is good, positive information that I have control over. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense for me to do things like to have a blog where I'm writing regularly, to comment on other people's blogs that are in my field so that those comments show up in the search engines, to have press releases, out there that have a message that I control and that I create.
Great. And let's go on and talk a little bit about our third and final case study, Dana, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, let's see. Read tech. Hold on one sec. Knowing how to read technology. I honestly can't read the name that I was given of the company contact person, but it's readtech.com, and their challenge is knowing how to write attention-getting press releases and what information would be considered newsworthy. And the little company bio, Read Technology transforms data into usable information at the highest quality levels for all facets of capture, conversion, management, and distribution of information and documents. Basically, they're kind of industry specific, and I'm not sure if something like Twitter, it's not a bad idea to be on there, but they're so narrow and targeted. Say they work with pharmaceutical manufacturers. It looks like they have government contracts. They, like with PR Web, and you're more the expert on this than me, you have targeted distribution. I would recommend that they use that targeted distribution to try to get in front of specific industry people who are going to be interested, because most people are not going to look at this and be riveted, because it's very industry specific. As far as newsworthy, every time they, looking at their website, it looks like they get a lot of contracts. Every time they get a contract from somebody, I would announce that. Every time that they hold an event, because it looks like they hold events and seminars, I would announce that. Every time that they create a new product, a new line of services, I would announce that. The thing is just not to be like shouting into the void and trying to tell everybody this. If you get what I'm saying, especially
right.
With the social media aspect, you really want to try to target your message, because not everyone is going to be interested in it. You don't want to pay extra money and take extra time to put your news in front of people who, don't need these services.
You bring up a good point and raise a good question, I think, which is about schedule. I mean, how frequently for your typical, let's not think about like a Sun Microsystems or an HP. Let's think about, kind of your small business. What would you say is a good schedule for how frequently you should put press releases out?
Well, I mean, I think at least once a month. I mean, if you could afford to do a weekly press release, you know, if you have that kind of time, then I certainly think it's not a bad idea. More than that's probably unnecessary because you probably don't have news to announce, you know, every couple days. But I mean, at least monthly, you know, a couple times a month is not a bad idea either because people really do forget about you. I mean, it's out of sight, out of mind. So that's why advertising always, you know, they always recommend frequency.
Right.
You want to repeat your message, and then there's always that, you know, I don't know if it's accurate, but the belief that people need to see your message at least 7 times before they act on it, kind of thing. I mean, I know that I frequently see something several times before I'm finally moved to be like, oh, I want to buy that, or oh, I need that. And the first time somebody sees something, you know, then they're aware of your existence, and then you need to keep building on that.
Is there a threat with beating people over the head? I mean, what is too much?
Well, you need to have something interesting and new to say in your press release. I don't think it's that hard to find something interesting and new to say, but every time you have something, you know, new to say, basically you're not going to be beating people over the head if you're telling them something new. If you're announcing actual news, repeating the same thing over and over again, that would be beating people over the head.
And this actually gets to a question we had earlier, which is, are there any risks involved with putting out too many press releases from a search engine perspective? And I haven't seen many cases, I mean, just personally, I haven't seen many cases where there's been some sort of, you know, penalty in search engines for putting out the same press release. But, you know, if you were to take the same general content and push it out over a newswire over and over, I do think that does start to present some sort of risk because the search engines would start looking at that as what's called a black hat tactic, which is where you're trying to game the system. And every time you're trying to cheat the system, you're always going to be raising the specter of some sort of search engine penalty. So I would say if you do have essentially the same content, don't put it out on a news wire over and over. You're not going to do any good for anyone, much less yourself. And Dana, to get to another point you made earlier about frequency, excuse me, I should note that the news search engines and the news portals, Google News and Yahoo News, will index content for 28 days. So if you want to keep your name fresh in the news search engines and the news portal and keep your message fresh in those places, it would make sense to put out one at least every month, provided you have the resources to be able to do that.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, you know, for PR Web's most affordable options, I just, and maybe this is me, I don't think it's that hard to write your own press release and just use PR Web, you know, once a month even. But that I do notice that the news, you know, the press releases I write for clients, they get ranked very high right away, but they do drop off faster than other types of content, like say maybe blog posts. So they do, you know, move off the front page of Google faster. The other thing you were talking about, like sending the same press release, if you send out the same press release to multiple services, what I'll notice is that at first it will be a bunch of the same press release on Google's front page, but Google will then end up picking one, and the rest of them will pretty much drop off to nowhere. So you'll get a bunch of good exposure, maybe for like a couple of days, and then Google seems to pick like the main one that it considers the most authoritative, and then, you know, the other ones kind of disappear. So it's not necessarily a penalty. That's like if it all appears on the same day. If you were talking about earlier, if you were talking about sending the same press release out every single month, I think that would just be pointless. I mean, you need to have new, fresh content.
Right. Now, what are the different ways you can send it out? I mean, we kind of have talked about Pure Web. This is a Pure Web webinar, and We don't want to make this a commercial. And we've talked about Twitter, which is another tool. What are some of the other ways, Dana, that you put out news releases? And what are the considerations you take into account when putting out news